Thanks a lot. It's great to be able to give this talk. And I will talk about conspiracy theories and specifically who believes in conspiracy theories. And this is a joint paper with Olga Zajkowska, who is in Warsaw. And we use Polish data and we look at a very specific Polish conspiracy theory. But before I get to that, so what do we mean when we talk about conspiracy theories? And essentially, a conspiracy theory is a deeply held belief that something evil or illegal is happening or has already happened. And this is due to a secret and coordinated action or conspiracy, somehow by powerful groups or elites. And usually these elites are seen as being motivated by some kind of sinister or gainful motives. Typically, the conspiracy theory offers an alternative explanation which deviates from the generally held, generally accepted version of events. Often, the evidence is not particularly strong, but the believers in conspiracy theories actually see this as evidence of a cover-up. So the fact that you cannot prove certain things, say that it's you cannot prove that JFK was not murdered by the CIA and so on. It just shows that the CIA is very good at hiding the evidence of their actions. And the culprits, the people behind the conspiracy are oftentimes people who are one way or another associated or affiliated with the government or otherwise some sort of an elite. Sometimes it's seen as a coordinated action of multiple governments against the people at large, so it's kind of them, the people in power against us, the rest, the majority of the population. Now, there are many examples of this. One of the oldest conspiracy theories, and one of the most successful, is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, essentially a book that was fabricated as a supposed proof that Jews were trying to essentially control the world, and this was used to justify persecution against them. Some people believe that in so-called chemtrails, when you see an airplane in the sky, there are these trails of smoke behind it, and supposedly this is because planes are used to spread either chemicals or biological agents or something else to poison the population. There's a number of conspiracies about the 9/11 event. It was either orchestrated by the Mossad or by the US government or by the owner of the World Trade Center buildings for various motives. In Germany, people believe that the city of Bielefeld doesn't exist. There's a conspiracy that Australia doesn't exist, or the country of Finland. And anybody here has been to Australia? And if so, can you be certain that it was actually Australia and that it was not a stage somewhere in Fiji where they make it appear like Australia? There's a conspiracy.
I have been to Bielefeld, and I can't be sure.
Exactly. There's conspiracy about George Soros, QAnon, which is so crazy that it must be true. A group of cannibalistic pedophiles led by Hillary Clinton caused the downfall of Donald Trump. And my co-author actually just showed up, apparently. So if you have any questions or criticisms, please address them to Olga. There's conspiracies about the COVID-19, that it was deliberately created by the Chinese or the Americans, that the Earth is flat, moon landings were faked, Ukraine is run by neo-Nazis and junkies and so on. Now, some of these conspiracies, some of these examples are funny, and this is why I put them there. I mean, some of them are outright ridiculous, like Finland being a made-up concept. The problem is that some of these conspiracy theories can have actually very serious consequences. They can be used to justify persecution of specific groups. And again, the protocols of the Elders of Zion were used to that effect. They were used to justify the Holocaust to a large extent, and justify persecution of Jews in a number of other countries before that. So they can be used to justify repression. Politicians sometimes successfully use conspiracy theories to drum up their own support or drum up support for their own causes. Trump was spreading a conspiracy about Barack Obama not being an American citizen because he wasn't born in the US, supposedly, and things like this. So you can use conspiracy theories, or politicians can use conspiracy theories to further a specific cause. Conspiracy theories can have serious implications, social implications. A lot of people believe that vaccines are harmful, and because of this, measles and other diseases have been spreading. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people were refusing to get vaccinated because they believed that this was going to kill them, this was going to make them infertile, and whatever else. And this made the pandemic significantly worse than it had to be. And so, while some of these conspiracy theories can be funny, they can also have serious consequences. One example, I actually have a link to a specific survey, but it has been replicated since then. But the first time I've seen this was there was a survey in Canada a year ago where they asked the respondents what they thought about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And they cross-tabulated this with people's respondents' opinions about vaccines. And it turns out that people who refuse to get vaccinated or who didn't trust in vaccination were also more likely to approve the Russian invasion of Ukraine or see it as being justified. And so there's, believing in one vaccine can make people more prone to believe in a different, believing in one conspiracy theory oftentimes makes people to believe in, to accept other conspiracy theories as well. So even if they start with something relatively innocuous, like whether the earth is flat or not, it may then make them more prone to believe in something more serious, such as refusing vaccines or approving an invasion of an independent country. Now, there is a number of literature. A lot of this literature identifies that a lot of people do believe in conspiracy theories. There are some determinants of or some correlates of believing in a conspiracy theory, such as low level of trust, having a perception of threat, having paranormal beliefs, and so on. Some of these papers or studies also point out that oftentimes people who believe in conspiracy theories hold mutually inconsistent beliefs. Some people believe that Princess Diana faked her own death and was murdered at the same time. And it's one or the other, presumably. And there can be potentially important political implications. There was a conspiracy theory. So there's a paper on the Czech Republic where a conspiracy theory was used by a candidate in the Czech presidential election to drum up support. And in this paper, they show that the impact of this may have been sufficiently large to actually change the outcome of the election. What about, there's Elena Nikolova is asking, what about education and belief in conspiracy theories? Off the top of my head, I actually don't remember, but I would expect that it is important, but I would assume it's important, but I don't remember whether this is actually properly confirmed by the literature. But yes, so what do we do in our paper? And in our paper, we look at a specific conspiracy theory. We have Polish data, and we study a Polish conspiracy theory. And this is based by the Polish presidential airplane crash in 10th of April 2010. And so this was a plane, a government plane carrying the president of the Polish Republic to a commemoration ceremony in Katyn in Russia, near Smolensk. And it was to commemorate the large-scale killing of Polish officers and intelligentsia who were captured by Russians when the Soviet Union invaded Poland at the beginning of the Second World War, and they were taken as prisoners into Russia, and eventually they were executed. So during this, essentially, the executions happened in and around a place called Katyn, and ever since things liberalized somewhat. So initially this was covered up by the Soviet authorities, but since 1990s, it was essentially during the Yeltsin era in Russia, it was admitted that this actually did happen, and ever since then, the Polish government used to go to Katyn to lay flowers at the monument and to commemorate this atrocity. And so on 10th of April 2010, a plane carrying the president and essentially the political elite of Poland crashed while trying to land in Smolensk on their way to this commemoration ceremony. And so this was, in terms of political leaders, it was a huge incident. It killed the president and his wife, the president of the National Bank, the heads of essentially every branch of the military, the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Special Forces, a number of members of parliament and members of the Polish Senate, number of generals, a lot of other people. 96 people died altogether. And in principle, if someone wanted to execute a decapitation strike against Poland, this would have been a good way how to do it. And so because of that, there was immediately some degree of suspicion. Now, it happened on Russian territory. There was a Russian investigation and an official Polish investigation, and they both came to similar conclusions. The Russian report was published first, and they essentially blamed bad weather. The plane was trying to land during fog, and they argued that the plane equipment to determine the height was improperly calibrated and was giving incorrect readings, and as a result, the plane was closer to the ground than the pilot actually had assumed. The Polish investigation essentially repeated these points. They also pointed out that the pilots were insufficiently trained to fly in the fog. The equipment at the airport in Smolensk was not suitable to facilitate a landing during fog. The communication between the plane and the pilots was difficult because the ground staff, the air traffic control spoke Russian, but the pilots spoke Polish and English, and they didn't speak Russian, so they couldn't really communicate properly. And also that the Polish investigation argued that there was a lot of pressure put on the pilots to land despite the circumstances not being actually not making a landing very safe, because the president, the alternative was to fly to Moscow, where they could have landed safely, but then this would require a long journey by train or by car, and the president didn't want to lose time on a substantial detour. And so supposedly president and his staff pressured the pilots to land, despite the pilots being reluctant. And in the end, the plane was approaching at an altitude which was too low, and it hit trees on approach towards the airport, which they couldn't see because of poor visibility. So this is essentially the official story. That it was a combination of poor weather, kind of pressure on the pilots, the error by the pilots who shouldn't really have tried to land in these circumstances. And then there's the alternative explanation, the conspiracy theory, And the conspiracy theory says that this was a conspiracy between Vladimir Putin and Donald Tusk. Donald Tusk so Putin is the president of Russia and was president of Russia already back then. Donald Tusk was the prime minister of Poland and a political opponent of the president. The president was Kaczynski. They're, as you might know, one of the leaders of the current ruling party in Poland is also called Kaczynski. The one who died was a twin brother of the one who survived. So it's Lech and Yaroslav Kaczynski. And so the president's party, or the party of the Kaczynski twins, they believe that they argue that there was this conspiracy between their political opponents in Poland and Russia's leadership. And as part of the conspiracy, bombs were placed on the plane. And then when the plane was in Russian airspace, these bombs were remotely detonated to bring the plane down. Now, there's very little evidence to prove this, but this is now a favorite explanation of the current Polish government. And a lot of people in Poland believe in this. And essentially, so this is the conspiracy that we want to look at, that there was this conspiracy to kill the president and large part of the Polish political elite, and that this was a combination of the Polish and Russian elites that conspired to do this. And sorry, wrong way. So this is Putin, who visited the place of the accident. Looks a lot younger than today.
Jan, a conceptual question. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Now, a conspiracy for me is something where we know, after some time at least, that this conspiracy is not true. Well, how can we know here? I mean, we do not know it. So it's not really clear whether it's really about conspiracy, but some people think it's conspiracy. Well, not. Yes, isn't that what it is? It's not very clear.
Yeah, but a lot of conspiracies, we can never prove that the conspiracy theory is incorrect.
Yeah. You see, my grandmother didn't.
You are muted again.
Decades believe that the Americans didn't land on the moon. Yes, but we knew that they were landing on the. Yeah, I think we know that this very high likelihood. Is this how do you judge this here? I mean.
No, but this is actually the beauty of conspiracy theory, is that a lot of them are things which are essentially impossible to prove, because none of us can actually verify whether people did land on the moon or not, unless someone were to bring me to the moon to see that the evidence of the landing. I can always choose not to believe. Even something as simple as whether you believe that the Earth is round or flat, it's difficult to verify, because you can go to a high.
I understand the point. Yeah. So it's not, of course, but there are likelihoods between it's here. It's Okay. Sorry.
I mean, after I started writing this paper, I joined some Facebook groups of flat earthers, and this was extremely illuminating and amusing at the same time, because the things which you would assume prove conclusively that the Earth is round, like when you look at objects which are far in the distance. If you, for instance, you're by the shore of a sea and you see a boat sailing into the distance, then the boat kind of starts sinking beyond the horizon. And at some point you see the top, but not the bottom of the boat, and so on. But the flat earthers believe that this is refraction of the light over the sea surface, and this is essentially a distortion. And so it's really difficult to convince these people, and it's also really difficult to verify what really happened. And in this particular case, Putin is not.
Do you need my support here?
Sorry?
Do you need my support? I mean, we kind of know that what happened in Smolensk already. After more than 10 years, we have all the reports, we have all the evidence that a lot of different factors mattered, and assassination was probably not one of them. First of all, we shouldn't land there in this weather, which was kind of to be expected. And all the reports that have been released, except one, which is politically related, kind of show that there are kind of very predictable factors that we could avoid. And we kind of, at this point, we know it was not an assassination, and that's why we can assume it's a conspiracy theory that you still believe. So we have one report which is political, and it was run by Macierewicz, who is a friend of Kaczynski, and they are kind of bringing up this report every time they need some extra points in the polls. And at this point, we all know all the points where this report is manufactured. What is omitted in the report. We have already some authors who retracted their names out of the report. So it's kind of not very convincing document. And it's still being used by the ruling party every now and then just to hit the temperature. So we can kind of safely assume that it was not an assassination. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Olga. But again, the beauty of this is that the people who believe in this conspiracy theory would just argue that it's exactly the other way around. But then, basically, the generally accepted version is that it was a combination of pilot error, bad weather, and pressure on the pilots. Right.
Given the history we have now, even many years later with Putin, he also claimed at the beginning he has not invaded the Crimea. But
well, exactly.
Yes,
so
we know now. Yes.
Yeah.
It's more. Well,
but this is the problem with conspiracy theories, that usually they address things which are complicated to explain, and there's usually some element of doubt about the official theory. There was this very successful movie about the JFK assassination, and there's this whole scene about the magic bullet and so on. So there are parts of the official explanation which are somewhat difficult to understand. And the people who believe in conspiracy theories tend to focus on this. In the case of the Polish airplane, the Smolensk air crash, one issue was that the physical evidence remained in Russia. The wreck of the plane was supposed to be transferred to Poland, and Russia didn't transfer it. So it's supposedly, I think, until today, it remains in Russia. And this is seen as an attempt of Russian authorities not to allow an proper independent investigation outside of Russia that would be beyond their control. There were some incidents where items retrieved from the crash were tampered with. Supposedly, the emergency services were stealing from the personal possessions of the victims. But this was also argued that this was an attempt to remove evidence and so on. Right. Okay. So the data that we use. This is a panel survey called Social Diagnosis, and this was a survey that used to be administered in Poland every 2 years. Using a panel with some attrition and some rotation, but basically there's a core of individuals who can be observed repeatedly over time, and this is what we use. And so given that it was carried out every 2 years, we can use the surveys after the crash. So we use surveys carried out in 2011, 2013, and 2015. And then in 2015, there was an election in Poland, and the new government, dominated by Kaczynski's party, by the party of the surviving Kaczynski, implemented a number of changes, and one of them was that they stopped financing the data collection for this survey. So the survey was discontinued. The survey addressed a lot of things. It's unlikely that they did it because of because the survey also asked about the causes of the Polish air crash. But this was one of the questions. So as a result, we have 3 observations over time, always 2 years apart. And we have a sample size of about 25,000 individuals. Yes.
The reason why they stopped conducting the survey was that people were reporting that their financial situation and otherwise is improving, and that was kind of opposite what they said in the just before the election. So when the evidence became contradictory, they cancelled just stopped giving money from the Ministry of Labor.
But okay. So the question that we use, so this is one of the many questions in the survey, and it asks which of the causes of the airplane crash in Smolensk the respondents consider as the most likely. And they were asked to mark up to 2 options. So we have up to 2 options per respondent. And they could give only one or none in principle, but they couldn't give more than 2 options. And so the first one is the essentially part of the official explanation, pilot or flight controller's error. Then we have this conspiracy theory that it was conspiracy assassination against the Polish president. Pilot being under pressure is again part of the official explanation. General chaos in the institutions responsible for the flight could be squared against the official explanation as well. And then it's other causes, and it's hard to say. And there's Olena says that she supports Klaus's concern because this is definitely a conspiracy theory. If Russians cooperated and allowed for thorough investigation and allowed the remains to be transferred, since this did not happen, this is exactly the reason which gives. Well, yeah. So. As I said, most conspiracy theories address issues where it's easy to take sides of one way or the other. As Olga tried to argue, there is quite a lot of evidence that it was an accident rather than an assassination. But basically, one point of conspiracy theories is that it addresses issues where there's essentially difficulty to provide 100% proof. So, yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure if we asked for the plane after the investigation was finished. I mean, it was very easy for the actually ruling party before the election to bring the topic, bring up the topic. But after they gained power, they kind of stopped talking about the plane, and probably as they didn't ask for the European funding lately, they probably didn't ask for the plane either, because this is not part of their story to bring the plane back.
Okay.
Just
not sure whether the European funding is. Sorry.
Just one other information question about landing. I should know as frequent flyer, but isn't the airport responsible for allowing airplanes to land? I mean, was it in the decision of the pilots in such a bad weather situation?
As far as I remember, that the pilots were advised to divert to Moscow, but they were not ordered to divert.
But that could be also have been Putin, yes? he had ordered the locals to not allow to allow them to land, or not to, yeah. So I mean, I'm just making up. I'm not saying, to be clear, I don't believe this was conspiracy. This was his. Yeah, I believe in your basic story, but the argument against is not weak.
No, but
they were advised to go to Vitebsk, like the plane just before them. I mean, Moscow was the other option, but the guys on the ground advised them to go to Vitebsk, so they decided to make one more attempt to do the landing, and they failed.
Yeah.
I mean, if they went to Vitebsk, they would be late for the cut anniversary, and General Błaszczak didn't want to allow it to happen.
Yeah, but also, so in principle, Klaus has a point that if Russian authorities, Putin or whoever else, wanted to kind of ensure the safety of the Polish presidential plane, then they could have ordered them. They could have closed the airport essentially. And then they would have to divert. But the conspiracy specifically says that it was the Prime Minister of Poland and Putin who conspired together. And for internal Polish purposes, this is an important aspect of the conspiracy, because this was essentially Donald Tusk getting rid of the president to open the way to him to kind of be in charge of the country. So this would be more difficult to explain with the actions of the Russian authorities, one way or the other. And so again, the conspiracy is that the plane, because it was a Russian-made plane, it was sent to Russia for servicing. At that time, they put a bomb, but this was somehow done with the knowledge of the Polish government. And it was used to, of the Polish prime minister, and it was used to get rid of the president, who was a political opponent of the prime minister at the time. Yeah, okay. And again, so the Polish participation in the conspiracy, I think, is crucial for this, for essentially the political value of this conspiracy. So it wasn't just a Russian attack against Poland, but it was a Polish-Russian conspiracy against a part of the political elite in Poland to essentially remove the president at the time. Okay, right. So this is descriptive statistics. In 2011, so 1 year after the accident or after the incident, about 12% of the sample believed that it was a conspiracy, and this is, people believed that the attack or conspiracy was one of the explanations. So they could have, again, they could have given two explanations. So 12% believe that it was at least part of the explanation was a conspiracy against the Polish president. Then 2 years later, we have almost 17%. But we can see that there was a lot of flows in and out of the pool of people who were believers in conspiracy. And so there was a gain of roughly 10% and a loss of about 6%. Now, if you would add up these numbers, you don't get exactly 16.67 because the structure, there was some attrition in the sample. So, but essentially, they should be roughly, if this were, the whole Polish population, these numbers should add up. And again, between 2013 and 2015, there was again a lot of flows in and out of the pool of conspiracy believers. And as a result, the share fell from almost 17% to about 15% in 2015. And so a significant minority of the Polish population are prepared to believe in this conspiracy theory, but they're far from being a large segment of the population. But again, not a small number are believers. And since we can observe people over time, about 2/3, a bit more than 2/3, never believed in the conspiracy. And less than 4% are people who always believed in it, in all three surveys that we observed. And then we can also look at people who we call firm believers. And these are people who, when they were asked this question, they only gave one answer. And it was the second option, that it was an attack or conspiracy. And so the share of firm believers is 7%, so it's about 2/3 in 2011. And it's again about 2/3 in 2013, and a bit more, something like 3/4 in 2015. And then the rest is people who could be called doubters, because they think it's one explanation, but there's also another explanation, which is potentially not consistent with the conspiracy theory or somehow superfluous to the conspiracy. This is descriptive stats. Let me go more quickly towards our results. So what we do is, so we in the current version at least, we focus mainly on the people who change their status. So essentially, we look at these flows in and out of the pool of conspiracy believers. And if we want to see essentially what are the characteristics of people who start believing and people who stop believing. So it's essentially these roughly 10% in 2013 and about 6% in the same year, and then 7.5% and 8% in 2015, basically people who come in and out. Men or women, I will show you whether they are more likely to be believers. I think women are actually less likely, if I remember correctly, but I'll show you the results in a minute. So what we do is, so again, we look at these flows. And first, we essentially look at these people in a logit analysis. Then we do a multinomial logit. And this is essentially because, so the people who become believers, essentially, at any point in time, if there are 4 types of people. There are people who never believed, which is the majority, the 72%. There are people who always believed, and then there are people who were not a believer and then became a believer, or people who were a believer and became a non-believer. So we do a multinomial logit, and we look at essentially the probability of these people being in these 4 types, where we take the firm non-believers, persistent non-believers as a base category. And we compare the determinants of being a firm believer or going from being a believer to a non-believer or the other way around. And then we also do a Heckman probit, and I'll explain that in a minute. But so this is the people who became believers in 2013. So this is people who didn't believe in 2011, and they started believing in 2013. And so women are not more or less likely to start believing. What we see is a positive effect of age. So this is odds ratios. So if it's more than 1, it means a positive effect. If it's less than 1, it means a negative effect. So basically, people who became believers in 2013 were generally older, less educated, significantly less likely to be married. And then we have a number of things. Depression or suicidal thoughts are an important and strong determinant. Being religious is an important determinant. Having friends, a lot of friends, probably means that people become believers because they talk to their friends. Essentially, their friends convince them. So having friends is significant. And then we have living in a rural area, and this has a very strong positive effect. So if you live in a rural area of Poland, you're more likely to believe. Being a farmer is somewhat similar. Being unemployed also has a positive effect here, but not being employed which is a bit surprising. What is also surprising, we also looked at labor market transitions as people who became unemployed, became retired, or became employed are not more or less likely to start believing. So it's not really a response to changes in economic status. People who live in the countryside, or people who are farmers, or people who are unemployed are more likely to become believers, but it's not in response to having become unemployed recently, and so on. This is the same thing for 2015. Again, no effect of gender. For the most part, positive effect of age, negative effect of age. And then we have the depressed people, people who are religious, people who are friends, people who live in rural areas, and so on. And then this is people who stop believing in conspiracy theories. And the interesting thing is that they seem to have the same characteristics as people who started believing. So essentially the same people who in 2013, for the most part, similar people who in 2013 were willing to start believing in this conspiracy theory, they're similar to the people who stopped believing. And so we have a negative effect of education. We have people who are suicidal or depressed, people who are religious, people who have friends, they live in rural areas, and so on. Limited impact of economic characteristics, although becoming employed seems to have somewhat surprisingly a positive effect. So this is positive effect on stopping to believe, which I guess makes sense. Unemployed people, again, are more likely to stop believing, just as they are more likely to start believing in a conspiracy theory. A similar thing, if you look at 2 years later in 2015, people who stop believing in conspiracy theory are, again, less educated, less likely to be married, more likely to be depressed or suicidal. They're religious, they have friends, they live in rural areas, and they're more likely to be unemployed. And so essentially the people who are in these flows here, it's a very similar type of people who come into the pool of conspiracy believers and people who leave the pool of conspiracy believers. Now, with respect to stopping believing, I guess Elena will be happy because women are more likely to stop believing, whereas they're not more likely to start believing. So this is the only positive, significant effect of gender. And then when we look at multinomial logic, so again, this is similar kind of analysis. So with multinomial logic, we have three categories that we compare against a base category. The base category is for 2013, these are people who didn't believe in 2011 and again didn't believe in 2013. Essentially, people who were non-believers in a conspiracy theory for 2 observations in a row. And against that, we have people who believed in both 2011 and 2013, people who believed in 2011 and did not believe in 2013, and the opposite, people who did not believe in 2011 but did believe in 2013. So essentially, the last column is similar to what we had before, or that the last 2 columns are similar to what we call started believing and stopped believing. And then we have these people who were persistent believers for 2 observations in a row. And again, as what we see is that the rule of living in a rural area actually is positively correlated with all 3 categories. Being religious is positively correlated with all 3 categories. Having friends has a positive effect on all 3 categories. And then we have the effect of age. And this is negative, and it's negative for the people who leave and enter the pool of believers. And here the effect of education for some reason is not significant. And then we have a similar thing in 2015. Again, the effect of age is similar for the last two columns. And then we have people who live in rural areas, people who are religious, people who are friends. So again, so we have somewhat more limited number of coefficients or explanatory variables, but the patterns for people who enter the pool of believers and who leave the pool of believers tends to be similar. Then the last part of the analysis is we look at, so we do a Huckman probit, and so in this case, what we do is we look at people who started believing in 2013 or 2015, conditional, and so in this case, this is conditional or not believing in the previous way. And again, the pattern is similar to what we had before. We have a negative impact of education. The age is negative, which is opposite to what we had with the logit. We have, again, the depressed people more likely to start believing. We have rural residents who are more likely to believe. Women are less likely to start believing in both 2013 and 2015. And then in the last three columns, we have these sure believers, and this is people who only give the assassination, the conspiracy, as the only explanation. And again, we have a negative impact of education. And we have the psychological factors, so being depressed and living in a rural area, which is actually not significant here. But right. Now, how much time do I have? Is it an hour or?
Yeah, I would say another 5 minutes so that we have 5 minutes of.
Yeah, okay. So we also did this thing where we edit family ties. We can identify households. Essentially, what this shows us is when your husband or wife start believing, you are much more likely to start believing as well. So family ties are quite important. But this is not necessarily very surprising. This is what you would expect. This is not necessarily that interesting. When we look at who actually, what is the political preferences of the people who believe in this conspiracy, they tend to be more likely supporters of the current government. But the believers actually come from other parties as well. So it's not limited to supporters of the PIS, the current, the party associated with the President Kaczynski who died, and Jaroslaw Kaczynski, who is now the leader of the party. And so to conclude, so when we look at the people who decide to start believing in a conspiracy theory, actually, I think this should be older for the most part, but they tend to be less educated. They tend to be more religious, have more friends, live in rural areas, and they are more likely to have some evidence of psychological issues such as depression or suicidal thoughts. Somewhat surprisingly, economic factors play a limited role other than being unemployed. And interactions within the family, as with friends, seem to be really important for this. Now, so this is for people who start believing in conspiracy theories. And as one thing that we didn't expect, which surprised us a bit, is that people who stop believing in conspiracy theories seem to be very similar. And so essentially, it seems that adopting and abandoning a conspiracy theory seem to be similar processes. These people, the people who start believing, are similar to those who stop believing. So these are people who are somehow fickle in their thoughts, people who are manipulable. And I think this is kind of the main result of our analysis, that these are people who are open to persuasion and manipulation, and somehow the conspiracy channels, conspiracy theories are successful in getting through to them. more so than, say, educational institutions or the official news media. But essentially, this is the silver lining in these results, that with proper communication, with better designed strategy for approaching these people, it's possible that they could be convinced to stop believing in conspiracy theories. And again, given that there are potentially important implications of believing in a conspiracy theory, the implications of this can be potentially wide-ranging. And actually, there are some examples of this. So Donald Trump used to be, for the most part, skeptical about COVID and about vaccination and so on. But actually, at one point, he recorded a short video where he advised people to get vaccinated when he was still president of the US. And there was an experiment. These guys, Larson et al., used this video in an experimental setting to see whether people who were skeptical about vaccines could be swayed by Trump's video. And they found out that actually, yes, people who saw the video by Donald Trump were actually more likely to get vaccinated subsequently. So it is possible to convince conspiracy believers or anti-vaxxers. And there was another experiment in the Czech Republic where first people were asked what they thought was the share of doctors who do not trust vaccines. And the respondents vastly overestimate the share of doctors who do not trust vaccines. And when they received the correct information, they were more likely to go and get vaccinated afterwards. Excuse me, sorry. And so, again, the bottom line is that with properly designed and effective communication, it may actually be possible to convince the believers in conspiracy theories. And this is all I had to say about this paper. I'll be happy to hear any questions that you might have.
Okay, thanks. Jinzia?
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting paper. So for your conclusion, it seems that this change in conspiracy theory is mainly due to individual, personal decisions, right? Or personal changes in view. So it doesn't look like there is much about contextual aspects. So there are, for example, rural area, these sort of things. But for example, if there is a change in the economic situation of Poland, or level of unemployment, employment goes up. But also, for example, access to internet, which clearly could have an impact, because people could use the internet to get informed. It could go in both directions. So
well, exactly. It very much goes in both directions. People can use the internet to get misinformed as well. But yeah.
But thank you very much for the comment. We can check the internet and we'll do it.
I think we do have this information. So yes. Fanny?
Yeah. Okay, just picking up on the previous question. So where does the social media fit into this story? I mean, because in a way, as you can see, that usually things get evolved, and then at least in the US, that's what we have seen. So I mean, I don't know whether you control anywhere in the storyline, or it's like a wash. And then the other question I have is, when I'm looking at these 3 surveys, which is biannual from what you said, is there any way you can string along the same individuals in all the 3 surveys, or is it like, what I'm trying to say is it like 3 different cross sections?
Oh no, it's a panel. It's a panel, yeah. So that's why we can do these things. That we can look at people who, people who started believing or stopped believing, because we know whether they believed in the previous wave. So there's some attrition and a rotation in the panel. So in 2011, we would have some people who do not appear in 2013 and 2015, but most of the sample is there. And this is what we use, essentially. So we have about 23,000 individuals that we can...
I mean, what I was wondering...
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. What I was wondering is if there's any way, just quote unquote, a balanced panel, just to see only those individuals who participated in all these three surveys, and just see how
could
you
do that. Yeah,
we did it. We did it. We tried to do it. We tracked all three waves, and the results were very similar, but the tables were bigger.
So one problem is, I mean, we did something like this for the multinomial logit, but we did it for 2 consecutive surveys. So the BB means that someone was believer in 2011 and believer in 2013. Now we could do the same thing with 3 waves.
Okay.
But then you would have BBB, BNB, BBN, BNN,
Yes.
and so on.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Thank you so much.
You could do a multinomial logit with 3 options against NN.
Okay.
But with 3 waves, we would have a lot more options.
With all that options, my head is spinning now. Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Thanks so much.
Hi, Olena.
Hello, thank you very much. I just have a question. I'm puzzled with these similar effects of different characteristics that you considered on both, well, basically non-stayers, if we can classify them or call them this way, right? So there are people who are staying with their beliefs and those who are changing. And, you know, couple of things that caught up my eye were, you know, getting a job or religious participation, and these are changes, right? So I just wonder if what it really picks up is the context of the environment and existence of the peer effects. So someone, you know, if kind of 2 jobs, 2 teams different, one where everyone around doesn't believe and the other where everyone around believes. So I get a job and, you know, whatever my belief was, on the one, I'm not talking now about self-selection. Let's say it's a random thing. I get a job. So I'm becoming more likely to change depending on what is the circumstances there.
Okay.
And, you know, what's the combination, the mix of people which is already on this job. Plus, you know, well, the self-selection is something to think of. The same with religious participation. If I increase the exposure, my exposure to communication with people who are there, the mix of people which is there will have an effect rather than, you know, this, which I suppose, I mean, I don't know, would it be possible at all to, you know, yeah, no, probably not to test for something like that.
Well, so one thing I want to clarify, which I guess wasn't very clear, most of these variables are not changes. So when you're married, that means at the time of the survey, you are married. So these are not people who are married in 2013, but they were not married in 2011 or something like this. When you're depressed, again, you are depressed in 2013, but we don't look at whether you were also depressed in 2011 and so on. Religious participation is how often, I think, how many times per week you participate in religious events and ceremonies. But this is
okay. Yeah, but still,
the only change variables is the last 3 at the bottom of this table, which we called lost job, got retired, and got job.
Mm-hmm.
And these are people. So lost job means you are unemployed in 2013 when you were employed in 2011, and someone got retired and got job. So these are kind of change of status variables. But other than these are just status variables. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So it's kind of seems like married people are more volatile. Unemployed people are more volatile. You know, this kind of thing, right? So if it affects both,
So married people, the effect is negative. It's less than one. So you,
well,
yeah,
less, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
unemployed
The
people
more
are
stable. I'm
likely to
sorry, I
study.
just I just used it as a
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for married people, they're also less likely to stop believing. So essentially, we're less likely to see married people in these flow categories that
this is exactly my point, is
Yeah.
that so for married people, if you think about that, for married people, they have someone with whom they share what they share, right? So
Yeah.
they are less likely to be subject to kind of other peer effects or something, because they have their reference groups perhaps in the partnership, right? So
Possibly, yes.
so it's like more about, so those findings are more about stability of beliefs.
But then having friends makes you more likely to start believing and to stop believing.
It'll be interesting to kind of interact friends with.
But who are the friends? Yeah, maybe these are different friends in different periods, and
No, but you know, friend is not someone who is your husband or wife, obviously. So the intensity of ties is different.
It'll be interesting to interact friends with depressed. I mean, if you are more friends with depressed people, you might, you know, this might be a bit bigger impact. Anyway, I think, sorry, I have to stop now because we have gone and a bit more. And so if you have further questions, then Jan is happy to take your emails or answer, use that avenue to answer your questions. Thank you very much, Jan, for a very interesting
Thank
talk.
you.
And we will see as many as possible, hopefully in April. The next is Elena. Is that you next month? Elena Nizalova is here. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, she's gone.
Thank you.
All right.